Turn it off, please. Turn it off. I cannot go on. Damn computer. Enough. Enough. I want everything back the way it was. Someone help me. Hi, my name is Martin, and I have been under the control of this computer for over a year now. It controls my actions, my speech, and even my thoughts. But don't start feeling sorry for me because without it, I wouldn't be able to move a single muscle. How did it happen and what was my life like before? I'll answer those questions for you right now. When I was born, my parents' joy didn't last long. On the day I turned 6 months old, they received terrible news. They were told that their son, that is, I, was terminally ill. I would grow normally until I was 5 years old, and then my brain would slowly start dying. It sounded like a death sentence, and that day was the most terrible one in my parents' life, considering that my illness can't be cured. Mom didn't want to believe what the doctors said, and for some time she went to the best doctors in the country, wrote letters to internationally famous doctors, and spent nights at all sorts of medical forums. But with each passing day, her hope grew weaker. Every single medical professional she spoke to said it was impossible to cure my illness. And at some point, my mother realized that it was true. Then she was overtaken by despair. She withdrew into herself for a while, succumbing to depression. Then, my parents realized that, while they couldn't change anything, they could make my short life happy. They wanted to spend our time together showing me as much love as possible. So pity and tears were forbidden in our family from that day forward. Time passed, and as the doctors promised, at some point my development stopped. But my parents spent a lot of energy and money maintaining my health, so my situation wasn't as bad as they predicted. Massages, acupuncture, gymnastics, and energy therapy did their job. Still, I moved with great difficulty, spoke poorly, and needed constant care. But one day when I was 10, and I had already broken all the records for life expectancy for people with my diagnosis, my family got incredible news. A scientist who had received a letter from my mother 9 years ago only just now answered it. He wrote that he could also try to help me, but he would need permission to connect my brain to a computer that would completely control me. He wrote that if everything goes well, I would be able to walk, talk, play sports, and even catch up with my peers in development. You have to understand that my parents simply couldn't refuse an offer like that. The possible advantages outweighed the possible disadvantages, so they began to prepare me for the complicated operation. It took about a year to prepare. Just imagine how much work the doctors had to do. It took more than 12 hours. When the operation was over, all they could do was wait. Within a month, it would become clear whether the experiment was a success or a failure. Everyone watched over me with bated breath. When I woke up 17 days after the operation and said very clearly, "Mom, I want pancakes with honey," my parents cried tears of joy. They realized the operation was successful and we had only the best ahead of us. The worst was finally going to be left behind. The progress was very rapid. In just 3 months, I began not only to speak but also to sing songs. In addition, I began to walk confidently, catch a ball, and even learn to take care of myself on my own. I understood how lucky I was and appreciated the chance. It was a chance for a normal and bright future. I sincerely loved my life and tried to always be positive. Within 2 years, I completely caught up with the development of my peers and began to go to school. It was a whole new chapter in my life. I really liked studying, talking to my classmates, and even falling in love. I really liked this feeling, but later I realized that it wasn't me who fell in love, but the computer that controls me. At some point, I realized that the system had malfunctioned and my body began to behave very strangely. For the most part, it was my thought process. For example, I began to absorb any and all information like a sponge. And I'm not exaggerating. My memory became phenomenal, and my brain started working at 100% capacity. I started memorizing the faces of passers-by, even if there were thousands of them. I could describe the detail in their clothes and where they were going. I began to memorize phone numbers, everything written on ads, and even the license plate of passing cars. Just imagine how many terabytes of information my brain absorbed every day. And you know, it wasn't anywhere near as cool as it might seem at first glance. After all, a lot of you probably think that with that kind of memory, you could easily become an excellent student and finish school within a year. And yes, you're right, but I started to get exhausted from all the information. My brain was aching and straining. Yes, it was my brain that began to strain and ache, even though I had no idea that this was possible. Once, thanks to this ability, I even managed to help a family. I was walking down the street and suddenly, I saw a woman crying and screaming that she had lost her child. My brain very quickly reconstructed the chronology of the events of the last hour and remembered that I saw a 3-year-old boy who looked like an exact copy of this woman's son. I immediately went there with the worried mother of the child, and after 10 minutes, the lost child was found. When I told the scientist who connected the computer to my brain about what was going on, he said that it was possible and that it could be an adverse reaction. He promised to fix the problem. The control center of my body was in his office. I was sure that soon it would end and I would become a normal teenager again, without this constant frenzy of data. Though instead, there was a new surprise in store for me. In addition to my phenomenal memory, I suddenly had the ability to think continuously. Now, I had several thoughts in my head all at the same time, 24/7. And they didn't stop, even when I went to bed. It was so painful and horrible that, at some point, I just wanted to turn off this fucking computer and become a vegetable again. And believe me, if I was ready to go that far, then I was really experiencing some seriously negative emotions and extreme fatigue. My thoughts started looking like complete gibberish. If you said them out loud, you would get something like this: white clouds, lonely, my victory, cat, nature reserve, 3, joy, running, infinity. Awful, isn't it? It was probably even worse than what was happening to me before the operation. For a while, I tried to stay calm and endure the interruptions happening in my brain, but then I couldn't take it anymore. I asked the scientist to stop it. I said that I no longer wanted to be controlled by this computer, and I demanded that it be turned off immediately. But what happened next horrified not only me, but also the smart system that controlled me. The scientist said that he tried to make changes to the software, but the smart machine had started to function autonomously. He couldn't interfere with it. On top of that, he said that now the computer can independently introduce new programs and settings into my brain at its discretion. Basically, the situation was completely out of his control. It was horrifying. Now, I had no idea what new surprises my brain would present me with the next day and whether it would kill me in the very next moment. Just imagine, I completely ceased to belong to myself. The computer completely took over my soul and body. However, the scientist managed to get some information out of this hellish machine. It turned out that most of the actions that I would take in the near future were prescribed in it in advance. Remember I told you about falling in love? So, in the machine, that was written in advance. In addition, my tastes were determined in advance. For example, on August 12th, I suddenly wanted to eat fish, which always made me sick. So, it wasn't me who wanted that, but the computer. This also applied to my strange actions and thoughts. But the most important thing was that now we could at least partially look into my future and maybe even prevent something from happening. We learned a couple of interesting and harmless things. Soon, I would want to learn to dance and would go to a dance studio. I would take an English class and go to a cafe to eat ice cream. But there was also something frightening. The scientist saw the information that, in a week, I would fight with my classmate Kevin and begin to beat his head on the floor with all my might until he passes out. Yes, at that moment, I didn't believe it, because despite all my quirks, I have never been aggressive or bloodthirsty, but I realized that I was completely at the mercy of the computer. A week went by. As usual, I went to school and tried to control myself. Yes, it sounds ridiculous because for a long time, I personally didn't control absolutely anything in my life. But still, I tried, and everything started off perfectly well. Kevin, who, according to the computer, I should have tried to attack, was nicer to me than ever, and I even grinned. How could I be aggressive towards him? But during the last period, I looked at Kevin. He smiled and waved at me, and it suddenly pissed me off. to the point that I wanted to punch him. Sometimes, seeing someone act all friendly and smiley just gets under your skin. This was one of those times. Then I could no longer control myself. I pounced on him and began to hit him with everything I had. It was like I was possessed. At that moment, all I could think about was how much I hated Kevin and wanted to destroy him. This was the first outburst of aggression I'd ever had in my life, and deep down, I was shocked. But these were just echoes of the real me. Only a shell of the former Martin was left. For over 10 minutes, no one could drag me off of Kevin. When it was over, he was unconscious and needed to go to the hospital. I was taken into police custody. When I was there was nothing I wanted except to be disconnected from this damn computer. I asked them to let me call the scientist who performed the operation and sobbed because I had nowhere else I could turn. Turn it off. Please, turn it off. I can't go on. This damn computer. Enough. Enough. I want everything back the way it was. Someone help me. I don't know if there is a way out of the situation or if something will change one day. So far, nothing has changed and I'm scared. I no longer want to be a cyborg dependent on this device. Do you think I can go back to normal one day? Write your answers in the comments, show your support with likes, and subscribe to our channel.